A decision day in London on Brexit, and perhaps on the political fate of Prime Minister Theresa May as well. Right now in Parliament, the House of Commons has begun the process of voting on May's proposed plan to pull the UK out of the European Union. But opposition by members of her own Conservative government and the opposition Labour Party looks set to hand May a decisive defeat. Now, the UK narrowly voted for Brexit on June 2016. So why is May's plan so controversial? The most contentious issues include the customs union, keeping the UK temporarily inside the EU tariff structure, limiting its ability to make separate trade deals. The Irish backstop, temporarily creating a single customs union between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland to avoid a hard border on trade between them, and the transition period, the length and terms of the time between the UK leaving the EU and no longer being subject to its rules. If Parliament rejects May's plan, she has only until Monday to come up with a new one, and if no agreement is reached by the March 29th deadline, well, our international affairs correspondent Bianca Zanini looks at the possible scenarios.
This is where it's all happening. Today, the British Parliament will vote on Prime Minister Theresa May's Brexit deal to leave the European Union. 5 weeks after May postponed the vote because it looked like she would lose it. And not much has changed.
So I say to members on all sides of this House, whatever you may have previously concluded, over these next 24 hours, give this deal a second look. No, it is not perfect, and yes, it is a compromise.
With the March deadline fast approaching, Britain has been bracing itself for a possible no-deal Brexit, a scenario many warn would be disastrous for the world's fifth largest economy.
No deal is certainly survivable, but it would be problematic for our economy, so much better to carry out the will of the British people, but in the way that causes the least potential damage to our economy.
The financial and potential social tumult that a no-deal Brexit would cause has many businesses and politicians worried. But the opposition head has already indicated, if the deal doesn't pass, Labour will call for a vote of no confidence in government.
The government is in disarray. It's clear, if the Prime Minister's deal is rejected tomorrow, it's time for a general election. It's time for a new government.
Another option is a second referendum on Brexit itself, something May continues to refuse, but many are calling for. Some even warning Parliament could simply decide to not go through with Brexit, but that scenario seems unlikely. While many are holding their breaths to see what happens next in the Brexit saga, others, like this boy band, are using whatever tools available to get their message across to the Prime Minister and to the British people. Bianca Zanini, I24 News.
Well, in the studio with us, we have David Mencer. He's a former director of the Labour Friends of Israel. But first, let's go to London and our UK correspondent, Jonathan Sacerdoti. And Jonathan, just bring us up to date. What's happening now in Parliament, and where does the vote look like it's going?
So, Kalev, as the evening wears on, we're going to get that vote, but it won't come immediately. The big so-called meaningful vote on Mrs May's deal will happen at around 8:20 p.m. UK time. But the Speaker of the House of Commons has selected 4 amendments to be put to the vote before that, which could modify or reject the deal, including a Labour front bench amendment, including also a Scottish and Welsh parties amendment, including another which would be an amendment put by Conservative MP Sir Edward Lee. He's got an amendment. So there are several different amendments which could completely modify the actual vote itself, and then the vote itself will take place, and then around 8:30 p.m. local time, we maybe will get an idea of how the MPs have voted, but we're fully expecting a crushing defeat for Theresa May.
All right, so that's in a little over 2 hours from now. We expect the actual vote. David, your Labour Party traditionally has been very supportive of the UK staying in the EU. In fact, one Labour MP, Tulip Siddiqui of Hampstead, actually put off a cesarean birth that she was scheduled for today. She put it off for 2 days so she could vote against this plan. But Jeremy Corbyn, his attitude toward Brexit, perhaps a little more ambiguous.
Look, I tell you, I made Aliyah a year and a half ago, and every morning I wake up in this country and I say to myself, thank God I'm not living in the UK. The mother of democracy, the country that invented parliaments, unfortunately is in an extremely sorry state. It has become a laughing stock around the world, and Jeremy Corbyn is by no means playing a responsible game in all this. He's trying to push the country towards a general election 73 days before Brexit's supposed to happen. Completely irresponsible. So, unfortunately, the country, the UK, unfortunately, is in an extremely embarrassing situation. It's becoming a laughing stock around the world. I'm sorry to say, because it's a country of my birth and a country which I love, of course.
Well, Jonathan, let me ask you on that. If Theresa May loses this vote and the Labour Party brings up a no-confidence measure, is she going to be able to hold together her government, avoid perhaps a general election?
Well, it's not certain at all. And one of the things that's trickiest in reporting about this is nobody really does know what's going to happen. Will Jeremy Corbyn even call that vote of no confidence? Even though he's promised repeatedly to do so, he might decide it's not a sensible idea. He could lose. She may lose the vote on Brexit tonight, but whether or not MPs would decide to vote against her government in a vote of no confidence is another matter. Remember, the DUP, the Northern Irish party that Theresa May relies on for her majority in the House of Commons, has said it isn't going to vote for this deal, but it said it would vote for her in a vote of no confidence. That's because just not wanting Theresa May's deal on Brexit doesn't necessarily mean you want a Jeremy Corbyn-led United Kingdom. Of course, even if he gets that vote of no confidence through, she has 14 days to convince MPs to back her in that. And if she can't do that, the Conservative Party may put together a different government which could have the confidence of the House. And if that doesn't happen, Jeremy Corbyn may not be able to get the confidence of the House himself, and that might tip off a general election. Who knows what would happen then, especially at this very fragile moment in British history.
Well, let me ask you about that, David. It's certainly a prospect that many people in Israel would be concerned about. Is there a possibility of a general election and Jeremy Corbyn having a chance amidst this Brexit chaos to emerge as the leader of the UK?
Well, as every day goes past, it's becoming more and more likely that there will be a Corbyn-led government. I've spoken to many experienced political leaders in the UK, and they now tell me privately that they fully expect at some point over the next 3 or 4 months for there to be a Corbyn government, Corbyn in number 10. No matter which way the scenarios play out tonight, in which way it happens, it does look like it's moving that way. I think Jonathan's absolutely right. The arithmetic is not with Jeremy Corbyn tonight, but it's moving in that direction. And what a sorry state that it's starting to look perhaps even more desirable that a Marxist like Jeremy Corbyn takes over in number 10 rather than the terrible mess which Theresa May has left the country in. She never believed in Brexit. She never actually voted for Brexit, yet she was the person chosen to try and negotiate Brexit. It's a complete disaster.
All right, well, we'll have to see how this scenario unfolds.